Christmas time is almost here. Now, when Christmas time comes, obviously winter does too. As the cold weather approaches and it creeps into our houses through our windows and doors, creeps under our clothes and creeps into our bones and makes us absolutely chilly. What do we resort to? Do we resort to jackets that make that horrible screeching sound whenever you scratch the fabric together? We resort to hoodies that have been by our side for months or even years and that we always find comfortable. I personally resort to knitted sweaters because my grandmother would always make one for me either every year or every other year, and it would always be a fun activity because we would sit down with each other and we would just have a blast. Today, I will be showing you how to knit. I think it's important because everybody needs clothes. Why not make them yourselves? They can be expensive. So, I will be showing how to start. I will show you a live demo, and then I will introduce you into a bit of the history of knitting. we start, Tying off my introduction, we see just how cheap knitting actually is. Yarn is everywhere, and I'm not joking. Walmart, they have super cheap prices. You can buy 4 bundles for $15, and each bundle is a couple of yards long. That's several people worth of yarn. Next, we see how cheap needles are, and anything can be a needle. You could use a marker, you could use a pencil, you can use your arms as knitting needles. As long as you have something you can loop yarn around, you can knit. We start by casting on. Casting on is super simple. All you need is one single needle to start, and then you just need a bunch of yarn. So you pull off a sizable amount. You don't want your yarn to bounce off your table when you go to pull it. Take the tail of your yarn that is not attached to the ball, create a loop by crossing over, take the loose tail, and stick it through. Put that on your needle, oh, my apologies. Put that on your needle and tighten it, and then that is called a slip knot. To continue knitting and casting on, give yourself a thumbs up because you've already come a long way. You started your knitting process. You've done something new. Give yourself a thumbs up, loop the yarn around, and cross it over the center. Stick your needle through, and then pull over. That is your first cast. Do that several more times. About 15 to 20 is a pretty standard amount. And then once you have more of these, then you can start your knitting journey. The best part about knitting is that if you ever mess up, super easy to undo. Next, we see knit stitch. There are several different types. I think there's about 30, if not more. I personally, in this ball of yarn right here, am doing a gardener stitch, but there's also purl stitches. There is double purl stitches. There is stockinette stitches, and then there's seed stitches. All of those are more complicated, and you need more complex movements for it. For this, super simple. As I said, same with casting on. You just need to pull a bunch of yarn off of your ball. Both hands are needed for knitting. And as you begin, you will stick your needle through towards the back, away from you, loop over, and then pull through, and then swap over needles. Super simple, super easy. Once you get a hang of it, it's just muscle memory. You can just do this while watching a show. You can do this while talking to your friends. You can do it while performing a presentation. You can do it pretty much anywhere. Now knitting, super simple, super easy. We've seen how to do it. Finally, we finish with casting off. As I said before, super easy to undo. Just take, pull out. Once you have your final row, or what you've decided as your final row, other needle, take your first loop, pull it off. Take your second loop, pull that one off too. And then you stick your needle through the first loop that you took off, and then you loop that over the second loop. You're closing off your stitches. You do the same thing. Take off the top stitch, go under the bottom stitch of the second needle, and then pull over the top stitch of the second needle. And then you just do that until you are satisfied and until it is fully closed off. And then that is how you begin tying off your yarn. Finally, we've unraveled this spool, and I have come to the history of knitting. Knitting started in the early 11th century in about the Middle East. It started in Egyptian culture, where we would see pharaohs wearing socks. Due to harsh weather and heated floors and stone, they would often burn their feet. And so they created socks and more clothes so that they wouldn't have to undergo that physical pain for much longer. We see paintings created of this. We see clothes today. We even see small creations that people create as heirlooms or just as little things for children to play with. But we always resort back to clothes. We can always find comfort in knitting, and we can always figure out a good way to be comfortable with anything, with blankets that we bundle up in, or even just sitting and doing something repetitive to get our mind off of things. Either way, knitting is a super easy subject to get into, and I'd like to thank you for listening to this.